All right, so without wasting much time, has been introduced. My name is Fortune, and I'll be co-assisting James in this particular module. All right, so with Economics 1B, it's quite different from Economics 1A. Economics 1B deals with macroeconomics. I'm sure you can see on the screen, the left-hand side of your screen, that is the module of Economics 1B, which deals with macroeconomics. And when we're dealing with macroeconomics, it's different from what we were dealing with in terms of microeconomics. Microeconomics, as the name suggests, we were dealing with individual elements within the markets. We're dealing with demand from an individual perspective, demand of households, demand of firms, demand in the goods market, demand in the factor market. But when it comes to macroeconomics, we are now dealing with economics from an aggregate perspective. We are now taking a broader view of economics. And when we are talking about demand, we're no longer referring it to as demand, but it's now aggregate demand. When we are talking about supply, it's no longer supply, but aggregate supply, because everything is now aggregated, and we're having an overview of the whole economy. All right, so in relation to Economics 1B, we are required to be covering 9 units, or rather 9 special topics that we are supposed to be acclimatized to before we are able to attempt a full exam. So that means that we are supposed to be comfortable with any of the portions within this particular module. All right. So we're going to try, just for today, we're just going to give an introduction to microeconomics, as well as look into some of the topics that we're going to be looking at. So when it comes to macroeconomics, as I have suggested, that we're going to be having an overview, or rather in top of the mountain perspective of the economy. We're no longer dealing with individual participants within the economy. As you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, there are various topics that you are required to be covering, measuring the performance of the economy, the monetary sector, the public sector, the macroeconomic theories, inflation theory, unemployment theory, economic growth and development, as well as the foreign sector. So all of these elements, you see that they basically describe the economic activities that will be happening within the economy. All right, so let me just increase my screen there. I hope it's still visible as it was. Okay, so today we're going to start on measuring the performance of the economy. Because we are dealing with macroeconomics, we need to understand what we are dealing with. So in terms of measuring the performance of the economy, we need to understand how are we going to be measuring the performance of an economy. What is it that we're going to be using to ascertain? Pardon me, for those with unmuted microphones, please, can you mute yourself? Those with unmuted microphones, can you please mute yourselves? It disturbs. All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm talking about measuring the performance of the economy. We talked about the fact that in terms of macroeconomics, somebody with an unmuted microphone, Emelda, can you please go there? No, it's not. Someone with an unmuted microphone. Those that are joining us, please mute yourselves. Let me try to mute them. Lillian, can you please mute yourself? Okay. All right, apologies for that. Okay, so when you're talking about measuring the performance of the economy, we want to see how we can assess the performance of an economy, because in terms of all the other things that we embark upon in our own personal lives and in different spheres of life, we have a way of measuring whether things are going well or whether things are not going well. So the same applies with an economy. We need to have a way of measuring whether an economy is performing very well or whether an economy is not performing very well. So that brings us to the topic of macroeconomic objectives, what we refer to as macroeconomic objectives. So with macroeconomic objectives, these are the 5 main objectives that are mainly used in measuring the performance of an economy. If you want to analyze whether an economy is performing very well or whether an economy is not performing very well, these are the main objectives that are used. First of all, we have what we refer to as economic growth. Secondly, we have full employment. Thirdly, we have price stability. Then fourthly, we have external stability. Then lastly, we have equitable distribution of income and wealth. Those that are joining us, please mute your microphones. Mandisa, Pakame, and crew, can you please mute your microphones? Those that are joining us, please mute your microphones. Thank you. All right, so basically we have 5 objectives that are used mainly to measure the performance of the economy. We have economic growth, we have full employment, we have price stability, we have external stability, then we have equitable distribution of income and wealth. All right, so when you're trying to see whether an economy is performing very well, these are the main elements that we look at. So going back a little bit, on the overview that we have in terms of the economy. So basically from a mountain top perspective or from an overall perspective, if you want to measure the performance of the economy, you look at the 5 major objectives that we looked at. But in order for us to do that, we need to have information in relation to the participants within the economic system, as well as the markets that are in existence within an economic system. So that is highlighted in what we refer to as a circular flow of income and spending. So as you can see on your screen, there is what we refer to as a circular flow of income and spending. This one basically summarizes everything that you're going to be dealing with in terms of this module. If you are to look at the different units that we ascertained earlier on, they can be summarized from this circular flow of income and spending. You can see them that we have 2 main participants, which we are going to be increasing to, we're going to be having a 3rd one. But we have 2 main participants. We have the households, we have the firms, and these create 2 major markets. We have the goods market and we have the factor market. And these we dealt with them in detail when we're looking at economics 1A, which is your microeconomics. And also as a measure of regulatory measure, we also have the government coming in between to assist in ensuring the various objectives that that have to be met within an economic system to ensure that they are going to be met. So basically, if you look at this circular flow of income and spending, and if you look at the topics that you're going to be covering, you can be able to identify each and every element that we need to be covering in terms of this module from the circular flow of income. So when you are trying to describe an economy or an economic system, you can use the circular flow of income because it basically summarizes everything. You can see there on the table of contents of your module that first of all, we're measuring the performance of an economy, which we're going to be delving with today. Then secondly, we have the monetary sector, which we're going to be also introducing there. Then we have the public sector represented by the government here, which basically highlights most of the activities that the government does within an economic system to ensure that the economy is functioning smoothly. Then we have the various macroeconomic theories that are used in determining the total or aggregated demand and aggregated supply from the supply side and the demand side of the economy, that is from the household side, and the supply side by the firms within the economy. Then we have the price levels, which is measured by inflation. The price levels enables us to have an economic system that is functioning because we'll be using money within this economic system. And the price levels are a measure of the prices within the economy and the various metrics that you're going to be using again within this economy. Then we have unemployment, the use of the factors of production within this same economy. As you can see from the households there, we have the factors of production, your land, your labor, and your other factors of production that we are going to be assessing in terms of the unemployment metric. Then we have the foreign sector. The foreign sector is representing the external sector, which we are going to also be talking about later on. So when it comes to measuring the performance of the economy, we need to make sure that our measurements encompasses everything that is happening within the economy. That's why we have economic growth. That is why we have unemployment or full employment. That is why we have price stability, which measures inflation. That is why we have external stability, which also measures the interaction of the local economy with external economies, and equitable distribution of income and wealth, which basically measures the distribution of wealth within the same economy. Right. So we're going to start by the first objective and describe them one by one and see where we're going to be ending at today. So the first objective, which is economic growth. The first thing that we need to understand within an economy or in trying to measure the performance of an economy is what is economic growth. All right, for those that are joining us, please mute your microphones. Please mute your microphones. Lillian, Mogo Shadi, can you please mute yourselves? Thank you. All right. So we need to understand what economic growth is so that we understand how we are going to be measuring economic growth. So in measuring the performance of an economy, one of the most important objectives of the policymakers of the government, of the finance ministry and the Reserve Bank of South Africa is ensuring that an economy is growing, and that is what we are referring to as economic growth. And by definition, economic growth is defined as an increase in the production of an economy over and above the previous year's period, or rather over a period of time. So when you're looking at an economy, the objective of policymakers is to ensure that an economy is growing, the production is growing. So the key word that we're going to be looking at in terms of economic growth is the increase in the production of the economic goods and services within an economy. So we want to ensure that when production is taking place within an economy, production is increasing than what it was in the previous year. All right. So that brings again another question: how is production measured within an economy? All right. So in terms of measurement of production within an economy, there is an important metric that is used in measuring production within an economy, which we refer to as GDP in short, which refers to gross domestic product. Gross domestic product. So gross domestic product, by definition, is the total value of all the final goods and services produced within the boundaries of a country within a given particular period of time. Episode, can you please mute yourself? Those that are having unmuted microphones that are just joining us, please mute yourselves. Thank you. All right. So I think we are supposed to make an announcement in the group that those that are willing to join these classes must mute themselves because it disturbs the flow. All right. So we're talking about, we've talked about economic growth, and we say that economic growth refers to an increase in the production of economic goods and services compared from one period to another. So when you're comparing the production that is happening over a period of time, and you realize that the value of the production is increasing, that is what we are referring to as economic growth. And the production itself, which is the key word, we want to see how the production is measured within an economy. So production is measured using a key metric, which we refer to as gross domestic product, better known as GDP, I'm sure by now. you have heard about GDP more often than not, especially when the finance minister is presenting their budgets, as well as when the Reserve Bank governor is doing their monetary policy reports. So gross domestic product, by definition, it is referred to as the total value of all the final goods and services produced within the boundaries of a country in a given particular period of time, and usually it can be 6-month period, depending with how the statistic has been presented. And it is the duty of States SA, as well as the South African Reserve Bank, to compile these GDP figures and then present them from time to time, so that those that are willing to, or those that have need of the information in relation to GDP, can access them from their websites, etc. You can access the GDP statistics of South Africa from the Reserve Bank of South Africa website. So there are basically 3 methods that are used when measuring this GDP, which is basically a measure of production that is happening within an economy. Because when production is happening within an economy, we want to know the value of what has been produced. There are so many things that are produced within an economy. The agricultural industry is producing, the manufacturing industry is producing, the insurance services industry is also producing, and a host of industries are producing. So we need to have a way or a manner in which these production values are measured. That brings us to the issue of prices. Lizzie, can you please mute yourself? Lizzie and Sindelwa, can you please mute yourselves? So that brings us to the issue of prices and the issue of the monetary sector. Because when the agricultural industry is producing, they are producing 100 trillion liters of wine, maybe in a single year. We need to know what is the value of this 100 trillion liters of wine that has been produced during the year, so that we can have a value that we refer to as GDP. Those that are joining us, can you please mute yourself? We need to have a value that we ascribe to those production activities that are happening throughout the entire economy. So you cannot say that the economy has produced 100 trillion liters of wine plus 2,000 cars that has been produced by Mercedes-Benz, plus 300 kgs of maize that has been produced by the agricultural industry. We need to have a way in which we are going to be measuring those goods and services. So that brings us to the methods that are used in calculating the value of GDP. So basically, there are 3 methods that we use in calculating GDP. First one is what we refer to as the production method. Then the second one is what we refer to as the expenditure method. Then the third one is what we refer to as the incomes method. I hope my screen is visible. I'm seeing my font is a little bit smaller there. All right. So these 3 methods are the ones that we mainly use in measuring GDP: the production method, the expenditure method, and the income method. So we're going to be talking about them one by one and try to come to a conclusion of how you can measure GDP using these 3 methods. All right, so the production method is sometimes referred to as the value added method, which basically sums the value that has been added at each phase of production throughout the production life cycle of a product. So we understand that when it comes to production, for us to have a final good that has been produced, for instance, for us to have one vehicle that has been produced either by BMW or by VW, whatever it is, it comes in stages of production. It is not just produced as a BMW, but it comes in through successive stages of production of value addition. So the value that is being added throughout the production process is what we refer to, the summation of those values is what we are referring to as the value added methods. So basically adding the value that is being added from each component when the tires were taken from Dunlop up to when the engines were again mounted to the car up until the vehicle is finished. The value that is being added at each stage of the production process is the value addition that is taking place. So each value addition process that is taking place is giving us a figure at each stage of production of each production process, and hence as a result that gives us the value of GDP. We're going to be looking at examples later on. Then the second one is the expenditure method. This is the most common one. The expenditure method is the one that measures the value of GDP by summing up the expenditures that economic participants have made on final goods and services within the economy. All right, so we looked at the circular flow of income and spending. Let me just go back a little bit here. And we identified that we have various participants that are within this economy, with the households, with the firms, with the government, and also with the foreign sector that you're going to be talking about. So the government, the households, and the firms, excluding these markets, are the main participants within a closed economy. And when it becomes an open economy, we will be having the external sector, which basically is illustrated by the difference between exports and imports. So basically, these three participants here in a closed economy would be let me mute Tomoji. Jackie is unmuted. A lot of people have unmuted themselves. Can you please mute yourselves? All right. Okay. So these three, the firms, the government, and the households would be the main participants in a closed economy. And when it becomes an open economy, where we now have the external sector, which is represented by exports and imports, we can now calculate the value of GDP as the summation of all the expenditures by all the participants within the economy. So in relation to household consumption is usually given a variable factor C in economics, which represents the consumption by households, and spending by firms, which is given the factor I, and G representing government spending, and X minus M representing the foreign sector. So let me just expand a little bit. So C here is representing consumption expenditure. This is consumption expenditure by households. So when households spend on goods and services, the sum of their spending is what we are referring to as consumption spending. Then I, capital letter I is representing spending by firms, investment spending by firms. So this is investment spending, okay, my spelling there, spending by firms. Let me just correct that one. Then we have G, which is representing this is government spending now. So we understand that all of these elements within the economy, or all of these participants within the economy, they spend for various reasons, to attain various reasons within the economy. Then we have exports. So basically, this is the export receipts by the foreign sector. When we export goods and services, the goods and services that we're exporting, the economy is receiving an amount of money, or rather an amount of income or wealth. That income or wealth is the X. Then we have M. M represents the importation, import spending by the local economy. So when you import from other countries, when you import from China, when you import from the United States, when you import from Germany, that importation is the one that is represented by M. And you can see that on our equation here, which says GDP is equating to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. We are having X minus M here because imports represents what we refer to as a leakage within an economy. These ones, they represent a leakage within an economy. We refer to it as a leakage because when you're buying from other countries, you are supporting external economies, and hence it represents an outflow of wealth from the local economy to the external economies. So hence it's a leakage. And when it is exports, we're exporting to other countries goods and services, and we are receiving wealth or we're receiving income into the local economy, and hence as a result, that is why X is positive and M is negative. All right. So this this equation here, GDP is equating to consumption expenditure by households, investment spending by firms, government spending, plus this one we refer to it as the net foreign factor from abroad. The difference between exports and imports would give us the value of GDP that is produced within the same economy, because all of the goods and services that has been produced would either be spent on by households or firms, or the government spending itself, or they can either be exported. So this gives us the expenditure method of calculating GDP. So this particular equation, we're going to be dealing with it in the coming sections when we'll be dealing with macroeconomic theory, etc. Because you realize that this total spending here would would be in reference to what we refer to as aggregate demand. It's basically an expression of what we refer to as aggregate demand. So we're going to be talking about it later on. Then the last method is the income method. So with the income method, this is another method of measuring GDP within the economy, which basically measures the incomes that has been received by all factors of production within the economy. So we understand that when an economy is in production, it uses or it makes use of the factors of production. And if you still recall in your economics 1A, in your microeconomics, it was stated that the factors of production belong to the households, and hence the households are the owners of the factors of production. They are the ones that provide labor, they are the ones that provide capital, they're the ones that provide entrepreneurship, they're the ones that provide the natural resources to the firms in order for them to produce. So the incomes that these households are receiving for letting out their labor, letting out their natural resources, letting out their enterprising skills, etc., would also be another way of measuring the value of GDP within the economy. So in terms of the households, I think you can list the natural or rather the factors of production that are normally within an economy, that are normally found within an economy. We talked about, so this is coming from the factors of production. In the factors of production, we say that households are the owners of the factors of production. And the factors of production include labor, it includes capital, include entrepreneurship, It also includes natural resources like your land, etc. Etc., etc., etc. All right. So all of these are remunerated in respect to the type of the effect of production that has been made available within the market. So if a household is made available labor within the market, what do they receive? They receive salaries and wages. And if the households is lended out their capital, what do they receive? They receive interest. And if the household is let out their entrepreneurship, enterprising skills, and they've started a business, what do they gain in return? They gain profits. And if the households have let out their natural resources, what do they gain? They gain rent. So the sum of these natural resources, which is in terms of their incomes, would be GDP would equate to the sum of salaries and wages received by households plus, for capital, we're talking about interest. For entrepreneurship, we're now talking about profits. For natural resources, we're now talking about rent. So the sum of these would give us the value of GDP from the income method. So you can see that all of these methods that we are using, the production method or the value added method, the income method where we are adding the salaries and wages, as well as the spending method where we are measuring the expenditures by all of the spending elements within the economy, they give us the same value of GDP. So that means that in any economy, production should equate to income as well as the spending. Of course, we're going to be having variability in terms of these when you're looking at the macroeconomic theory and policy, where you would rarely be equating to production and income. There would be various divergence from that, but that will be at a later stage. But for now, production is equating to income, and it's all equating to spending. At a later stage, you'd realize that production and income are basically the same thing, and spending would be the only independent variable within the economy that would be determining how much would be produced. That will be later on. So basically, this is how we are supposed to be measuring an economy, and this is how we're supposed to be calculating the values of GDP. And in a nutshell, again, you can see that the households are there on the spending elements, households, firms, government, foreign sector, and income. Wages, salaries, rents, and profits are on the income method. Then the production method, which is the value added method, where we are calculating the value of each added each level of production. So basically, this is what how we can be measuring the metric of GDP. So once you're given the values of GDP, and you are required to calculate whether there is economic growth or not, there is a formula that we use in calculating economic growth. So we'll be concluding, I think, in 10 minutes. So just allow me to conclude here. In 10 minutes, we'll be concluding. Since it's an introductory lesson, it don't have to be long. So economic growth formula, it is measured as the current year's GDP. That is, if you're given GDP over a period of time, you would measure GDP as the current year's GDP minus, okay, I've left GDP there. GDP minus the previous year's GDP over the previous year's GDP. Then obviously, to put it in percentage terms, we have to multiply by 100. And the GDP that we normally use in calculating economic growth, it is what is referred to as real GDP. So basically, there are two types of GDPs. There is what is referred to as real GDP, and there is what is referred to as nominal GDP. So real GDP is the one that is used in assessing whether an economy is growing or whether an economy is not growing. So suppose you are given figures, you can apply your figures as per the given example. I'm not going to be looking at that much in greater detail since it's still an introduction. We're going to be looking at it later on. So for now, we just want to differentiate between nominal GDP and real GDP. All right. So when measuring our GDP, we talked about the expenditure method or the spending method, where we look at how much the households have spent on final goods and services over a period of time. But we understand that prices also do not remain constant over a period of time, especially nowadays. We understand that there is inflation and all these other things that are within our economy. So with inflation, this is whereby the prices are increasing gradually or at a sustained rate. We're going to be talking about inflation later on. So when there's inflation, it means prices are not constant, and hence the price at which you bought a particular product last year is different from the price at which you're going to be buying that particular product this year. For instance, the price of fuel, how much fuel was per liter last year, and how much fuel is today. You can see that there's a huge difference between those two prices. So that gives us an indication that prices can increase without an increase in the production or productivity itself. And the general gross domestic product that we can calculate without taking into consideration the changes in prices is what we refer to as nominal GDP. So for instance, I want to give an example here. So for nominal GDP, we are saying that suppose that we have 1,000 liters of fuel, 1,000 liters of fuel. And last year was 2021. In 2021, fuel per liter was around 16 Rand per liter. So that means for 1,000 liters, we're going to be paying something like 16,000 Rand in 2021. This is in 2021. And in 2022, the same 1,000 liters, the price now has changed. The price now is let's choose 25. Let's just choose 25 Rand per liter. It means that the value of fuel in 2022 is increased to 25,000, but the same 1,000 liters has been produced. There is no increase in production of fuel. The same amount of fuel has been produced, but the values are different. We have 16,000 in 2021 and we have 25,000 in 2022, indicating an increase in value. But the increase in value is not directly related to the increase in productivity of fuel. So that means that if you're going to be using nominal GDP to measure whether an economy is growing or not, we are going to have an erroneous statistic within our measurements. So hence, as a result, that's why we use what we refer to as real GDP. So for nominal GDP, is basically the current production quantities times the current prices of the product. So it gives you a falsified reality of what is happening within the economy. And you might think that your economy is growing because if you say the value of 1,000 liters is now 25,000, last year it was 16,000, you might find yourself in big trouble in years to come, thinking that your economy is growing yet it wasn't growing. So hence, as a result, we use the real GDP metric. The real GDP metric basically measures productivity based on constant prices. So the prices that we'll be using in terms of real GDP would be emanating from a base year, or rather a year in which it was deemed that the prices were more stable. So we understand that in relation to the current prices, the current prices are not stable, and hence we are supposed to be taking a portion in the past in which the prices were stable. For instance, maybe in 2008, maybe we might say maybe prices were a little bit stable as compared to where they are now. And maybe that same price of the 1,000 liters in 2008 maybe was around 10 rand or so, 10 rand per liter, 12 rand per liter in 2008, and that will give you the value of liters, total liters is 12,000. And if you're going to be using the same on measuring the total production, you'd realize that if there's no increase in production, there is no increase in the real GDP. So hence, it gives you a clear picture of what is happening within the economy. All right. So that gives us a leeway into what we've talked about. All right, so we've talked about economic growth, how to measure economic growth, what economic growth is, and the various variations of the metric of GDP within an economy. So that means we have talked about the first objective of an economy. I don't know if there are any questions or anything that you'd want to ask before we close this session. I think for today we can call it a day. Then in the next session, we might be talking about full employment. We'll also be talking about price stability, etc. Any questions? All right, so since you do not have any questions, I have questions for you, which we can look at before we close. All right, so these are just general multi-check questions that are usually asked within the exam type scenario. All right, so they're just basically three. The first one is saying, to which one of the following, or rather, which one of the following is a major macroeconomic objective in most economies? Then we have a list of options that we have there. A is saying to increase the exchange rate of the currency. B is stating to reduce all import taxes and controls. C is saying to increase economic growth. D is saying to stabilize the price of petrol. E is saying all of the above. So for those with speed, you can type on the chat there. I'm seeing others are saying C. All right, I'll answer to that question. Somebody is asking the difference between economic growth and economic development. I'll answer to it. So everyone is saying C. I think this one is straightforward. So 1.1 is C. Then 1.2 is stating that the three major types of markets in a circular flow of income and expenditure are, we've talked about this one, public goods, private markets, non-governmental markets. B, sector markets, monetary markets, foreign exchange markets. C, goods market, service markets, sector markets. D, goods market, sector markets, financial markets. E, public markets, private markets, and financial markets. For those with answers, you can type on the chat. Which one do you think is the correct solution here? Someone is saying C. Someone is saying C. Others, C. If we are saying C. Nom T is saying C. Anyone else with a different answer? All right, let's see what C is saying. C is saying goods market, service markets, and factor markets. Goods markets, service markets, and factor markets. All right. Then anyone else with a different answer? Everyone is saying C. Someone is okay. I can't pronounce your name. D'Souza. D'Souza is saying D. Let's see what D is saying. Goods market, factor markets, and financial markets. Okay. All right. So the three types of markets. First of all, let's start with the most popular one that everyone is saying: goods markets, service markets, and factor markets. C is not the correct answer because goods market, service markets, though they are markets, but they are not differentiated in terms of economics. They are one and the same markets. The goods and services market is the same market. It is not differentiated. Then obviously the factor market. So that means that you have one market that you have not mentioned if you are to pick option C. Then option D I would take option D to be correct. I would take option D to be correct because option D has the goods market, it has the factor market, then it has the financial markets. So I would take option D to be correct because it represents all of the markets that we have in existential within an economy that generally in existential within an economy. So you'd realize that within an economy we have the goods market, or rather the goods and services market, and we have the factor market where you trade your factors of production. Then we have the financial market where you are going to be introducing your capital for you to be able to earn interest from. So option D is the most correct answer. So if we were in a grade 1 classroom, I would say clap hands for D'Souza. I'm just kidding. All right, then the last one is if we were to add remuneration of all factors of production in the economy, we would obtain, if we were to add remuneration of all the factors of production within the economy, we would obtain, then we have A, gross domestic product using the expenditure method. Is that correct? B is saying gross domestic product using the value added method. C is saying gross domestic product using the income method. Then D is saying gross domestic product using the production method. Then D is stating a new method there, a mathematical method that we've not heard of. So someone is saying A, two people are saying A. Two people are saying A. A is saying gross domestic product using the expenditure method. All right, let's see if there's anyone else with a different answer. People are still saying A. Those that have typed are still saying A. All right, anyone else with a different answer? Okay, C. Someone is saying C. All right, C is gross domestic product using the income method. That's correct, Shepard. That is 100% correct. And if I had chocolates, I would give you chocolates now through the Zoom. All right, so C is the answer that you're looking for, because if you add the remuneration of all the factors of production in the economy, you'd obtain gross domestic product using the income method. That is the one that I last talked about, where we're adding salaries and wages, rent, profits, and interest. So that is for the remuneration. A is not correct because A is using the spending method or the expenditure method, and it has nothing to do with the remuneration there. So the keyword that we are looking for there is either expenditure or income. So the thing that we're looking for there is income, which is the same thing as remuneration. All right, so my questions are ending here. So in the next session, we'll see what we can cover. One of the macroeconomic objectives. We are not yet on a rush. This semester is still a long way, so we still have time. That's why I'm not rushing into some of these topics. So in the next session, we will be looking at some of on speed. All right, then somebody asked about the difference between economic growth and economic development. All right, so economic growth and economic development, they're different, but they express almost the same thing. But the problem is that with economic growth is not economic development. That's one thing that I have to clearly highlight. Economic growth is not economic development. Economic growth simply refers to the growth of the economy, not the development of the economy. Now, when you're looking at the development of the economy, we are now looking at other aspects which may not be non-economical. For instance, the social aspect, as well as the individual. From an individual perspective, is the economic growth inclusive of everyone within the economy? That is where we are now looking at what we refer to as GDP per capita. Is everyone growing as the economy is growing? So those two are different. You're now looking at the distribution of income within the economy. We're also going to be looking at the equitable distribution of income and wealth. it also highlights the economic development within an economy. So with economic development, you're now looking at the development of the citizens within the economy, especially the welfare of the citizens within the economies. As the economy is growing, is the welfare growing? Is everyone included in the growth process? Are they able to access health? Are they able to access education? Are they able to access basic amenities, etc.? So this is a very sensitive subject, especially when it comes to this country of South Africa, because if you see the growth that has been happening throughout the years and the development that has been happening from an individual perspective is not telling. So this is one of the most current topics, or rather the hot topics these days. All right, so I don't know if you have any questions before I close. I think we've come to the end of the session. Anyone with another question? All right, so thank you very much for attending today's session. I hope to be seeing you again next time. God bless you. Good evening.